This is Jeff Barnes. At the time of this recording, I'm age 60. I've lived in Central Florida for the past 10 years and moved here from Missouri. Here's a picture of the Barnes family taken around 1905. There are 3 direct generations in this picture: my grandfather, great-grandfather, and great-great-grandfather. I'll share about each one in this video. Before moving to southeastern Missouri, the Barnes family lived in Kentucky. Here's a map of Kentucky. They lived in Adair County, Kentucky. It is south central, and you'll see it in the green. And they lived there for several years before moving to Missouri. My great-great-grandfather is William Pinckney Barnes, born February 2nd, 1847 in Adair County, Kentucky. He died July 22nd, 1919. He's with a beard, seated holding a small boy. He's around 55 years old in this picture. William Pinckney Barnes was a medical doctor who rode in a horse-drawn buggy to see his patients. Now I want to give credit to Jack Hardesty, a history professor in Illinois and related to the Barnes, for the following information about William Pinckney Barnes. This has been verified by several people. And I quote, "There are tales told in the Barnes-Hardesty families about connections with members of the Frank and Jesse James gang. The stories have been told by different members of the family at different times and to different people. Dr. William Pinckney Barnes moved to Bollinger County, Missouri sometime between 1890 and 1892. Our family tells of a time when the Barnes family still lived in Kentucky. Dr. Barnes was about 21 years old. Jesse and Frank James and some of their gang came to the Barnes home one night, were fed and their horses attended to. William Barnes refused the money when Jesse tried to pay for the meal. The men voiced their appreciation and left on fresh mounts without incident. Later, when Barnes went to the barn to tend his own animals, he found a large sum of money in the feed box." An interesting story there. Here is Dr. Barnes' gravestone, and also it has his wife Elizabeth Sexton Barnes listed there also. Next in line will be my great-great-grandfather. This is James Franklin Barnes, and he's seated with a vest on and a white shirt. He was born February 13th, 1873 in Metcalfe County, Kentucky. That's right near Adair County. He died May 23rd, 1952. Now, James Franklin Barnes was married twice. His 2 spouses were Lou Harper Barnes and Daisy P. Barnes. And here are some pictures I found of him. That was not very good. This next one, though, is somewhat before he died. My mother said she actually met him one time when they visited near Joplin, Missouri. I went to Joplin area and actually found his gravestone myself. So here it is, James F., born 1874 and died 1952. And that is down, I think, in Carthage, Missouri, which is near Joplin, Missouri, at a cemetery there. The next in my family tree is my grandfather, Horace Barnes. In this picture, he's age 9. He is the one second from the left. This is James F. Barnes' son, but I'll come back to him in a minute. I would like to point out others in the picture that I know the names of. The wife sitting next to William Pinckney Barnes is Mary E. Sexton Barnes. This is his second wife. His first wife was named Martha E. Barnes. The girls in the back row are from left to right: Leora Barnes, Minnie Barnes, it's actually Minnie Overton Barnes, and Ann E. Barnes. Seated in the middle with the tie is Curtis Edward Barnes, and the boy sitting on Dr. Barnes' lap is Johnny W. Barnes, and the boy seated next to him is Joseph H. Barnes. I do not know all the relationships, but assume that most are their children or grandchildren, except for Minnie Overton Barnes, who is the wife of Curtis Barnes. Charles R. Barnes is in the back on the far right, and David S. Barnes is on the front row, far left. Pretty cool picture with 3 generations of my lineage. Now let's go back to my grandfather, Horace Barnes, age 9 in this photo. He was born May 19, 1893 in Bollinger County, Missouri, and died February 15, 1951 in Sedalia, Missouri. He actually died 4 years before I was born, so I never had the opportunity to meet him. Here's the marriage license I found of him married to my grandmother, Muriel Irvin Dean Barnes. They were married March 23rd, 1915 in Bollinger County, Missouri. Here's a few pictures of my grandfather, Horace Barnes, and I'm getting information from his obituary and also from some family members that I talked to years ago. He was a veteran of World War I. He was also a traveling evangelist and pastored a Pentecostal Church of God, one in Tipton, Missouri. He and my grandmother lived most of their lives in California, Missouri, Tipton, Missouri, Bunston, and Sedalia, Missouri. Now, honestly, there's not a lot of nice things to say about this man, so I'll try to be honest but respectful. After talking to my two aunts and my uncles, it appears Horace had some sort of breakdown when his 20-year-old son Jasper Barnes was killed in a car accident. He feels that it was really not an accident, but somebody might have caused it. I'll share more details when I get to Jasper. But apparently, Horace turned somewhat cruel and calloused after the death of Jasper. There was one point a few of the boys, including my dad, confronted him and made him leave to protect their mother. Now, my grandmother, Muriel, was a great lady by all accounts. She died when I was 6, so I have a faint memory of her. Here's the picture that I have of her at her youngest age. This is a picture with her and her boyfriend named Hayden Holt, taken around 1913. She would have been around 16 years old in this picture. The following pictures are how I remember her. You can probably notice that she had some Cherokee Indian blood in her. It's kind of cool. I have some video of my grandmother. This was shot by my Uncle Walter, which was my Aunt Opal's husband. Had an old 8mm at that time. And we always would go to my grandmother's house around Christmas time, and this was one of the Christmases. This is, I'm going to guess, around 1957, because I do see, there I am, I do see my mother right there, and she's pregnant with my brother Jim, and he was born in later December 1957, so I'm guessing that's at that time. My grandmother was a great cook, and really enjoyed going to her house. She watched me quite a bit, so I had a close relationship with her. She died when I was 6, and so got some faint memories of her. And there's me again. But I really enjoyed the time that I spent with my grandmother Barnes, even though it was very, very short-lived. Horace became ill before he died, and I was told that him and Muriel reconciled, and she actually took care of him before he died. They're both actually buried in a cemetery in California, Missouri. Here's Horace's headstone, where you see he was born May 19th, 1893, and died February 15th, 1951. And we also have Muriel's headstone, which I took a picture of that, which is in the California Cemetery there in California, Missouri, where she was born October 3rd, 1897, and died February the 11th, 1962. The first son of Horace and Muriel Barnes was Jasper Cornelius Barnes. He was born September 25th, 1915. In Bollinger County, Missouri. He's the one that was killed in the car accident in California, Missouri. And that's the one, again, where his father was very upset about. Here's a picture of Jasper and his girlfriend. And she was 16, I believe, and he was 20. Here's an article of the accident about when he was killed. The driver of the car where he was in was Chubby Albin. He's a picture of Chubby. When I was researching several years ago, I actually called Chubby on the phone and tried to talk to him. He was very old at that time, and he actually hung up on me. And what was interesting is that he died right after that, I think a week later. The death certificate I thought was really interesting. It talked about, of course, it was a motor car accident, how he was killed, but it said manner of injury, motor car accident, and nature of injury was car and ditch. And I guess they didn't have medical examiners back then like we do today, but I thought that was very interesting that they apparently didn't perform an autopsy or anything like that. And again, Horace felt there was foul play involved when his son was killed, and that's what caused him to apparently go off the deep end, as my aunt had told me. This next picture is of my uncle Job Silas Barnes. He was born May 11th, 1928. In this picture, he's about 8 years old. Sad to say, he died at the age of 13. There are different stories on what caused his death. One was he fell out of a tree and fractured his arm. In looking at the death certificate, it does show that he had a fractured arm, and so I'm sure that contributed to his death. It was a sad day, though, for the Barnes family, losing a 13-year-old, I'm sure. Here's a picture of the rest of the Barneses. This was taken several years ago, and back row would be left to right my dad, Raymond Barnes, and then Clarence or Jack Barnes, and then Adolph or Charles Barnes, and then Bob Barnes, who is the youngest. Seated left to right would be Opal, her last name was Cogdill, and then William Barnes, and then Jewel Patterson. And I'll try to talk a little bit about each one of them since I knew all of them. This is a picture of my aunt Opal and her husband Walter, and I do remember them as I was growing up. He was one that really enjoyed being with the family. This is Jewel Patterson and her husband Albert or Delbert. They lived in Warrensburg, Missouri. Here's a picture that I always enjoyed. This is my Uncle Adolph, my Aunt Opal, and my dad after a brief fishing trip. Next, I want to talk about my Uncle Jack. He was actually a missionary in the Philippines, and he was very close with my father. They were close in age, and they just did a lot of things together. And he actually died at a young age of 36. He was killed while in the Philippines during a bus accident. Here's a picture of him when he was married to Dorothy, and my mom and dad actually stood in with their wedding. And I know, like I said, they were very close, and it really was hard on my dad. I remember the phone call he received when Uncle Jack had died. What I'm going to do now is simply play my Uncle Jack. I've got a preaching tape of his while you look at some of the slides and also some of the video of Uncle Jack.
Life and remain shall be caught up together with him in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air, and so shall we ever be with the Lord. He that will come shall come and will no longer tarry. Are you ready, my friend? He's coming. He's coming. Are you ready? Are you walking with God daily? You can't walk with God then on the streets in gold unless you walk with him now. Yes, you cannot walk with God the Lord on the streets of gold unless you walk with him on the streets of might and temptation and suffering and human misery down here below. Qualifications for walking with him there in heaven are walking with him here now. Yes, the amazing possibilities of walking with God. Friend, brother and sister in Christ.
This next picture is of my Uncle William, and he was my dad's older brother. He died in his early 50s, I think around 51, of a heart attack. Great guy, though. I remember him very well. I want to turn the attention now to my dad, and here's some pictures when he was younger. He was born September 11th, 1931. He spent some time in the Army also. He died May 15th, 1985. And he really enjoyed fishing, and he enjoyed hanging out with the family. He loved our farm. I do remember that. And another thing, he enjoyed playing music, and I played music with him. It's one thing we did together. He played banjo and played the harmonica, and Uncle Adolph and myself backed him up. In fact, I've got a tape here of him playing the banjo, so take a listen to this. Here's one of the last pictures we have of Dad with Mom together. He died in 1985, had a heart attack, and he was 53 years old. And so think about him a lot. Next is my Uncle Charles. We called him Adolf. He was in the service for several years, and in fact I got to see him not too long ago in Las Vegas, where he lives now. And here's a more recent picture of him that I found on his Facebook page. Him and I played a lot of music together. In fact, we just did it recently when I was in Vegas. And here's the youngest. This is Bob Barnes. Got to spend some time with him also, just not too long ago while in Vegas, where he also lives. What I'm going to do now, just close out with letting you look at some of the video that I found. Actually, years ago, Aunt Opal loaned me the video, or the 8mm that they had, and I just was shooting it and videoed it, and then of course gave it back to her. But just take a look at this, and it'll close out on its own.